Thank you for joining us today for our webinar on building blockchain projects on Enterprise Ethereum. We've got a great presentation scheduled for you today. Before we get going, I just wanted to take care of a couple housekeeping issues. First of all, we will be recording this webinar, so if you have an issue with that, you can disconnect now. Also, we will be following up with everybody to share the slides as well as a copy of the recording of the webinar, so keep an eye out for that. And finally, we will be saving some time at the end of the webinar for some Q&A, so I encourage you to log your questions into Zoom, and we'll get to as many of those as we can during the Q&A session. Okay. So before I hand it over to our panelists today, I just want to kind of give you a quick overview of the agenda. We will start out with why Enterprise Ethereum. We will then go into a section around Enterprise Ethereum Alliance. We'll have York from Microsoft share his perspective on Microsoft support for Enterprise Ethereum. Then we'll share some adoption stories of customers actually in production on Ethereum. And we'll wrap it up with how Kaleido is helping to accelerate Enterprise Ethereum projects. And then again, we'll wrap up with some Q&A. So with that, just a quick introduction of our speakers for today. We have Steve Cerveny, founder and CEO of Kaleido, Sophia Lopez, founder and COO of Kaleido, Rob Dawson, protocol engineer for Pegasus, and York Rhodes, co-founder, blockchain at Microsoft. So with that, I will hand it over to Steve.
All right, thanks, Trent, and thanks everyone for tuning in. Really exciting topic today. We wanted to zoom in on Enterprise Ethereum and share a view on the landscape, a little bit of the history and context for why enterprises are increasingly deploying Ethereum in their projects. They're launching and building new business networks on Enterprise Ethereum, and you know, this can be a little confusing if you're just coming in with a very cursory or basic understanding of the blockchain space. It's confusing because Ethereum is unique. Ethereum is unique in the sense that there is both a large mainnet, which we'll call public Ethereum, that's running many thousands of nodes out there on a single network, a single chain that is processing, let's say 10 to 20 transactions per second. Miners are kind of crypto economically incentivized to try to mine your transaction into a block on this very large chain. And so a lot of people just are aware kind of tangentially that Ethereum exists as this public large utility network. In the enterprise world, what's happened over a number of years now is the core technology around Ethereum has been taken and adapted specifically for enterprise use. And at a really basic level, what the community have done is we've pulled the bits out of public Ethereum that aren't appropriate, and we've layered in specific components and technologies for enterprise use. So what it's very possible today now to do is to go to an open source community or to one of the many vendors that are building on Ethereum and get a solution, or even get just the raw open source technology yourself and stand up your own Ethereum network. You can call this a private chain or a consortium chain. And what you're running as the engine is this enterprise Ethereum engine, which scales into the many hundreds of transactions per second is very customizable. There are different consensus algorithms, different technology choices that the ecosystem has built. Because Ethereum is in this unique place of having both, one of the largest, probably the largest mainnet out there, Ethereum and Bitcoin are two of the most notable, as well as a massive sort of groundswell of enterprises adopting it. What you see is this very large and vibrant developer ecosystem around Ethereum. The sort of estimates do vary from analyst to analyst, but it's quite clear that it is significantly larger than the next largest development community out there. And it's growing faster than any other development community as well. And this has resulted in huge amounts of innovation, many companies starting in the space, lots of investor capital flowing into the Ethereum ecosystem as well. And then looking a little bit more broadly beyond just the developers in the ecosystem, you have really multiple open source communities driving forward roadmaps in a sort of a vendor neutral way, with many small and large companies working hand in hand and contributing in that space. You also see those two sides of the coin, figuratively, the public network and the private or the enterprise side working together with their own roadmaps, looking at now a really exciting future that Rob's going to touch on a little bit around what we call Ethereum 2.0. And we're starting to see this most advanced and sophisticated ecosystem evolving in really interesting ways going forward. And we'll have a whole section on the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance, because it's really important to what Enterprise Ethereum is and how it's evolving. And it's an opportunity, if you're not familiar with it, for you to get actively involved in the community. So in the enterprise blockchain landscape, we often talk about the big three. If you're not familiar with the enterprise blockchain landscape, there is Hyperledger Fabric, one of the many Hyperledger projects, and the first one, and it's a technology that's often seen as being backed by IBM. There is Corda in the space, which is backed by the R3 group, a company, and it's its own technology base. And then there's Ethereum. Ethereum, as kind of the largest of the ecosystem, has multiple actual implementations done by different vendors in different parts of the ecosystem. Rob's going to tell you a little bit about the newest, or at least the newest newly branded Hyperledger Besu, and about the code base that is now part of the Hyperledger ecosystem. There is Quorum, which is one of the longer standing contributions, as popular as well, which is largely backed by JP Morgan Chase and others. Block Apps is a startup in the space that has their own implementation. Clearmatics is a company that also has another implementation. And these companies are all working together in the context of the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance, working towards a common spec. So what you have is more of a Java-like scenario. If you remember back into ancient history with J2EE, and in a very large ecosystem like Java became, the sort of ultimate goal, you could say, is to have a common spec and to allow many vendors to build to that spec and to compete and to offer interoperability. And that's the exciting position that the enterprise Ethereum space finds it in itself in the ecosystem. Here's kind of just a quick snapshot of almost a pseudo architecture, just to give you a sense, if you're on the more technical side, for what's under the hood in an enterprise Ethereum node. What you see in the blue is an implementation of the public Ethereum. So that core engine, the core runtime, the Ethereum virtual machine or the EVM is there, that's kind of running at the heart. It's accepting or running smart contracts and sharing state or storing state of those contracts and sharing it across its network. And these nodes are all running the contracts themselves and forming consensus. So the green block is the consensus algorithm. And what we've done with Enterprise Ethereum is we kind of keep that core EVM engine there, but we've pulled out the consensus and we've now made that pluggable. And Ethereum is unique in that it has multiple pluggable consensus algorithms that are available now off the shelf. And those are hardened, many of them are, and they're even now standardizing and becoming part of the spec, and you see multiple implementations of those. In addition to that, it's quite common for enterprise use cases, even within your private network or your consortium network, to want to engage just a subset of a network in a particular transaction. And for better or worse, in the enterprise space, we talk about that as a private transaction. And so what you see is other components layered on in order to enable private transactions for a subset of participants in a chain. So this is something that's native to many of the popular distros in the enterprise Ethereum space, and is a key requirement that we see in at least 90% of the use cases that we work with at Kaleido. So that was a quick overview. I'm going to turn it over to Rob for the next section to drill down a little bit more.
Great. Thanks, Steve. So looking then at what enterprises need in terms of the enterprise Ethereum, there's a number of different categories and things that we consider in that sort of space, and a number of things that are being driven from that client specification from the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance. A lot of these areas are the non-functional type requirements that get talked about in any enterprise system. When we were building our old Web 2.0 and intranets and systems back last millennium, these were the things that we cared about then, and they're the things that are really important when we think about our enterprise requirements. So that's the privacy and permissioning type features, our performance, scalability, reliability, and then can be sometimes with these new sort of blockchain worlds, sometimes thinking about the governance. So I'm really going to be touching on the first four of those in the next set of slides, sort of starting with the privacy on enterprise Ethereum. So as we look at privacy on enterprise Ethereum, there's a number of different aspects that can sort of hook in and mean. And so there's, to start with, thinking about being able to control who can see what, that sort of standard encryption type tools that you might think about. And so as we think about that, there's two different sets of tools that we think about in a enterprise Ethereum client. So the first being some sort of on-chain based privacy technique. So using cryptographic techniques to help shield and hide your data. And the second then is being able to use a more sort of off-chain technique, which uses the EEA private transactions. So that first one is using things like ZK snarks, bulletproofs, Peterson commitments, a bunch of really interesting, well-designed cryptographic techniques for shielding and hiding confidential information. And then again, that second is using, there's a behind the scenes, those private enclave that we were talking about before on that previous slide, using a technique like that to transmit and keep those private transactions only viewable by the people that are involved in that private transaction. And so within Pegasus and with Hyperledger Besu, we have the Orion Private Transaction Manager, which performs that type of function and fits into that role. The next thing when thinking about these privacy and permissioned networks is being able to control who is having access into the network. And so the EEA sort of standards and the client specification within the EEA is specifying a way of helping to do that. Within the Kaleido offering, that sort of works in really well for helping to control that, that sort of access to the network. Another area that gets talked about often within permission networks is then also being able to control who can submit transactions into that network. So that permissioning has the two sides of first within a peer-to-peer network, which nodes or clients or computers are able to connect into the network. And then the second aspect within the permissioning model there is which accounts are able to submit transactions into that network. So that sort of covers our privacy and permissioning at that sort of high level within that world. The next thing that's really important to think about is the performance and scalability and finality of the systems. So as Steve was talking about early on, within the main sort of Ethereum sort of space, there's more like the order of magnitude of transactions per second is not really super fast at the moment in the current world of Ethereum. There's a bunch of work in the future, which I'll touch on later, which is working to help scale that. But as we think about right now, using different consensus mechanisms is a tool that is there to help improve the number of transactions per second and allowing that number of hundreds of transactions per second. So there's a bunch of innovations that are happening in the enterprise Ethereum space to help provide consensus mechanisms that offer fast transaction finality and also getting that higher transaction throughput. Then thinking about that some more, being able to have, I guess, the peer-to-peer networking helps support that going through quickly, making sure that the layers and the communications are helping to work well in a consorting context, and then having layer 2 scaling techniques that sit on top of that underlying core protocol to make sure that you can scale even further. Another aspect that is important in the enterprise Ethereum space and thinking about those enterprise needs is just that, I guess, that resiliency, the reliability, the security of the network. Within the Ethereum, that public network that we've got running on Ethereum has been running for that long period of time. It's a well-established ecosystem of developers. The protocol has that now there's millions of blocks that are sitting on there with, I guess, larger numbers then of transactions that are sitting inside those blocks. So there's this long-running, well-established Ethereum network that is really solid and well-known. So that's one of the key sort of magic bits that the public network provides for Ethereum. And then as we think about that some more, we've got the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance that has been rapidly working together to pull together client specifications. And when I say rapidly, that's rapidly in terms of standards groups. So it's a ongoing effort to help ensure that really good, high quality standards are being built and then implemented by clients. And this is also then the sort of volumes and the numbers of transactions and everything that's sitting there shows that sort of robustness and reliability of this enterprise Ethereum, which sits on top of and builds even more on top of that underlying public Ethereum code base. So we've been talking a lot about the enterprise Ethereum and some of the things that enterprises need. Another thing that we think is really important in Pegasus is being able to think about how these systems run in production. And so within Pegasus, we've been working really hard to ensure that these elements that we've been talking about here are being made real in terms of production systems. So we've been working very closely with some of the other groups in the space to help ensure that we're building a really high quality enterprise Ethereum client. We've been working with the Hyperledger and the Linux Foundation to help ensure that we're making a very open client that is available to the wider blockchain community and enterprise blockchain community, and then working very closely with the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance to make sure that what we're building is both complying with the standards, and then working hard to make sure that the standards are representing the best needs from the customers and interactions that we're having with a lot of our partners and customers. Working through this, we're then working hard to drive out some of that next generation innovation and making sure that things like the updated versions of the Enterprise Ethereum are coming through, and then some of the advanced privacy techniques, making sure that we're supporting the current version of Ethereum, and then also looking forward to the Ethereum 2.0. And so we've got this really great team that is looking at both the enterprise space and then the Ethereum 2.0 space. So the Ethereum 2.0 is the next generation of Ethereum and the next generation of our public network. And so as we think about Ethereum 2.0, it's really being set up to help drive out the speeds, the scalability of the network. There's a bunch of techniques that are being sitting behind that to help make sure that happens. It's making sure that the public network is there to support a lot of the volume of transactions and the properties that we've been talking about on the enterprise side. The public network is going to implement a new consensus mechanism, so a proof of stake based consensus mechanism. So people will be able to stake their Ether and use that as the way that we're agreeing and getting consensus around the blocks that are being generated. The Ethereum 2.0 will have a sophisticated sharding mechanism to help ensure that it's not just a single list of blocks, but you end up with that sort of sharded approach for scaling up that's familiar to us all from, I guess, databases, and it's a well-proven technique for scaling systems up. And then working out great ways of having multiple different execution environments. And some of this approaches with different execution environments are going to allow us on a more public network to start to enable some of those private transactions and properties that we've been talking about as well. So this sort of Ethereum 2.0 space, which is where the cutting edge research is happening right now, is going to ensure that Ethereum scales on that public side and also provides some great tools for our enterprise Ethereum blockchains to work great and to scale into the future. The exciting thing with Pegasus, though, as well, is that the work that we're doing now in Ethereum is what's moving forward towards that Ethereum 2.0. And so we can feel confident that the technology we're building on today with Ethereum and enterprise Ethereum is going to move forward and work into the future, into that scaled, amazing world that is going to be a part of Ethereum 2.0. And so I'm going to hand over now to York, who's going to talk to us about, start by talking to us about the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance.
Great, thanks, Rob. How's the volume? All right, so cool, awesome. Thanks, Steve. So the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance came together a couple of years ago. I think it might be 3 years ago at this point, with the core objective of taking the various client implementations of Ethereum that were focused on essentially the enterprise space, and actually trying to harmonize what was going on in that space. So we recognized, along with the other members of, the other founding members of the organization, that there was a lot of activity going on by enterprises where they would fork the base of this very interesting product called Ethereum and make modifications on their own. And so we sort of had a fear that there would be all these bespoke implementations, custom implementations, and effectively not have any kind of standards or supportability across the ecosystem. So that was sort of the core genesis of the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance, was really to pull that together and organize all of the great work that was going on and make sure that when enterprises are running a product, they're running a standard product that then allows larger vendors to actually have offerings around around those standard products, and enterprises to be able to feel that they have repeatable processes and repeatable implementations. So core to the goal of the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance, obviously, is to stay aligned with the Ethereum Foundation and all of the great work that's going on, and leveraging that great work in the Ethereum space. And so these organizations work very closely together. In fact, just in the last couple of months, the executive director of the Ethereum Foundation became a board member of the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance. And this is part of the alignment, making sure that these organizations stay driving towards, the common goals of this, similar stack. The other thing that the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance will also look at is being able to issue EIPs into public Ethereum where we feel that that's necessary to drive forward, the core of the stack. There also yesterday was a launch of a mainnet working group within the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance. And there's been a launch of a token taxonomy group within the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance as well that we'll talk a little bit about. Go to the next slide. So along with the vibrant open source developer community that you saw earlier in the slide deck in public Ethereum, which is really one of the benefits of this ecosystem, is a very large number and continuing to grow member-based organization in the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance. As I mentioned, Microsoft is a member, JP Morgan. You can see a lot of banking organizations here, as well as startups that are, the core of their businesses focused on the Ethereum ecosystem, as well as implementation vendors, whether it's an Accenture or an Ernst & Young or others. And Intel is also a board member of the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance with quite a bit of interest, obviously, in a number of different projects in the blockchain space, but also very interested in what's going on in enclaves, obviously, as that's a core part of their business. Across the top here actually is some very deliberate associate member collaborations, one of which is, as I mentioned earlier, the Ethereum Foundation. The DIF, or the Decentralized Identity Foundation, is a membership-based organization as well that is, its core mission is focused on having these publicly registered identities that have a root of trust based in a blockchain or other systems. So that's an important association as well. When the Hyperledger Besu implementation was finalized with the Hyperledger Foundation, that's Rob's product, who you just heard from, we joined as an associate member across membership with the Hyperledger Foundation. So they are also a member of the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance. So just some of what you're seeing here is, I think, a rationalization a little bit of what's going on in space. It's a very vibrant community, both on the enterprise side as well as on the open source, public, incentivized Ethereum side. Next slide. The EEA is a organization that drives specifications. Here you can see the first specification was released in May 2018, and that was the first, essentially, the EEA version 1 specification, and wind that forward to today, and you have the, essentially the version 3 of this specification was delivered in May of this year. Most recently, the Trusted Compute work started up, and so that's very focused on essentially enclave-based implementations. You can go to the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance and yes, just checking that spelling was correct, for documentation on the specifications. And the vendors which are building enterprise Ethereum compliant stacks build to these specifications. The goal here is to basically be able to have a network where you can have choice of stack and ensure that there's interoperability, and that's clearly the type of thing that enterprises are looking for. Go ahead. The Token Taxonomy Initiative, which was just launched, actually has a very similar idea in that Ethereum has been the most advanced ecosystem that's been working for the longest on very interesting different types of tokens that represent both physical and digital objects. And what we recognized in the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance was that these token objects are great for representing business objects of different forms with many different types of properties. And in a world where there's a tremendous amount of complexity in a new nascent product area, whether it's blockchains or tokens, we needed to get some common language across the ecosystem, and more broadly, not just across the Ethereum ecosystem, but also across the Hyperledger and other blockchain ecosystems like Corda, for example. And so we brought together in this initiative, which is housed within the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance, the multiple stakeholders from multiple blockchain ecosystems. So in this group, we have the Enterprise Ethereum, as well as the public Ethereum, and Corda and Hyperledger membership. The goal being to drive essentially a common framework or a common model for thinking about tokens. Clearly Ethereum is well advanced in this space based on all of the great work that's been going on for a couple of years. So we're leveraging much of that knowledge and that history and research that's been going on to drive this. On top of this, what we'll see is the ability then for software vendors to build product which can interact with tokens, and that might be business product, it might be other types of product that then can do it in a reasonable way without having to necessarily think about the underlying blockchain implementation. So we think this actually will help drive forward token understanding broadly outside of the blockchain ecosystem, whether it's with regulators or government or enterprises more broadly as they look at these interesting objects with all these different programmable properties. Go ahead. So Microsoft's been supporting Ethereum from early in its journey. I actually co-founded our blockchain work at Microsoft with a colleague in 2015. We broadly think about the partner ecosystem, whether it's Kaleido or Pegasus or Hyperledger Besu, as well as the other blockchain stacks that are out there. And we think about how Microsoft, as a cloud vendor that embraces open source, can broadly help to advance this nascent technology and make it a comfortable place for enterprises to do their work, as well as provide or in some ways uplift the developer experience. And so what you see in our offerings is a very full embracement of open source technologies, Hyperledger Besu, for example, Quorum, Clearmatics, Kaleido, et cetera, all run on Azure as an option. And so we have a very rich embracement of those offerings within our own cloud. When we think about what enterprises are trying to do and the enterprise developer community that Microsoft has, that stems from our many years of work of enterprise products like SQL Server, Visual Studio, on and on. We think about a very rich developer experience that's an end-to-end type of developer experience. So the three areas that we really focused on is launching and managing networks, modeling smart contracts, that's your developer experience, and then building and launching applications, which is also part of the developer experience. And then from there, from that foundation, then we think about what are the gaps that data enterprises are faced with in order to actually deliver a full stack application. And then we try to fill in those holes with added value. Just as one example, we do contribute back to open source. The projects that we embrace that run in our cloud, we are very deliberate about making sure that we can contribute back to the open source implementations of those products, because we couldn't run a service on top of them if we were not able to actually contribute back. So actually, let's go to the next slide. So one of I would say one of the more mature and interesting products is the Azure Development Kit. This actually shows up in a couple of graphics, which we'll get to in a moment, which embrace a number of the projects that are in the community that have grown up to develop blockchain-specific development tools. So what you'll see here is a direct embracement of products like Truffle. Ganache is basically, it allows you to do offline development of an Ethereum implementation. What we've recently done is we've added the ability to actually drive smart contract development directly to the Ethereum mainnet through Infura, which is another product that's been around for quite a while. If you're a public Ethereum developer, you recognize that name also. And then the last bullet point is really thinking about, blockchain as a product, like most other enterprise product, is not an island unto itself. It is a part of a full stack of an implementation. And so we think about what are the other types of connectors that we might have in Microsoft's Azure estate of capabilities, and how could we actually connect those to a blockchain. And so those are things like Logic App connectors, Microsoft Flow, and Power Apps, which address different type of developers on the enterprise side. One of the reasons why this blockchain development kit is so mature is we actually shipped the first version of this in April 2016, about 6 months after we started this journey in 2015, in the form of a Visual Studio plugin for Solidity. Solidity being the programming language of Ethereum. Next slide, please. So this actually was pulled together, and this is the Visual Studio interface on the right. If you don't happen to recognize it, this is available and has been available since last fall as something called the Azure Development Kit. This one addresses very specifically the things that you do in a Ethereum development environment, because most of the tooling that is integrated here is actually for Ethereum. Obviously, you can use Visual Studio for other blockchain development as well. So if you go to the next picture, actually, this is a picture of the screen that we had in the booth at DevCon, which is the big Ethereum conference that just happened in Osaka. And what you can see here is if you read down this list, particularly on the left side, you can see integration with OpenZeppelin, which is basically a standard library of smart contracts. You can see the Azure Blockchain Service down towards the lower half of the screen. You can see the integration with Infura, which gives you the ability to deploy smart contracts to the public mainnet, or even the test nets like Ropsten, Rinkeby, Gurley, and Koban. There is also, as I mentioned, a very significant integration with Truffle that doesn't quite show up on this particular screenshot. But we basically offer you the ability to do full lifecycle management of your smart contracts, including offline and online debugging. So really leveraging the best of the work that's going on. From a Microsoft assets perspective, it's the work we've been doing to integrate into VS Code to make that a very seamless experience, and then obviously embracing the work that's going on in the open source community around all the different components that are going on there. So go ahead. So this is just an example very quickly of one of those different types of connectors that I mentioned. Logic apps in Azure have been around for a while. There are about 200 different enterprise connectors in Logic apps. And you can think of this in some ways like an if this then that. So it's a visual coding environment that allows you to connect up various different enterprise endpoints. So you can imagine, for example, being able to connect, and actually there's examples right here on the screen, connect an Ethereum endpoint to a SQL database. So there's, this gives you a tremendous amount of utility when you think about how do I extend my blockchain capability into other enterprise applications, whether it's a database or for visualization through Power BI, or into a message bus like Event Grid, you know, or even third-party products like SAP and Salesforce. It's just a rich connection environment. When we think about what's going on in the permissioned enterprise Ethereum space, largely that is many enterprises coming together, and those enterprises then collaborating through the means of the blockchain implementation. All of those enterprises have their own enterprise applications that they need to connect to. So something like Logic Apps actually makes it very easy for each individual enterprise to make their own choices of how they're going to integrate with which products as part of that collaboration. So it gives a lot of flexibility there. Continue on. We've gotten very good reviews from Gartner and other analysts. I guess Forrester is also referenced here. We've been very thoughtful. We've been working on this for, as I mentioned, since 2015. And we are connecting with things like Logic Apps and Power Apps and the other tooling in our cloud with this, you know, rich development environment to really allow enterprises to create the next wave of interesting applications on the internet. We also fully believe that, you know, while there are multiple blockchain implementations, it's actually, you know, if you go back to sort of some of my initial thoughts in the space, that, you know, having a public side of a network like this looks very much like having a public internet and an intranet. And I think having a recognized or reasonable stack that works in both of those implementations is actually something that's quite an advantage. And it's one of the reasons why you see such a large ecosystem of developers in the Ethereum community. All right.
So thanks, Steve, Rob, and York. Great overview of how enterprise Ethereum has evolved to meet the needs of business and organizations, and an overview of strategy and standards in the space. Steve and I have been working in the blockchain space since 2015, in the enterprise protocol space, as well as launching the industry's first blockchain as a service over 3 years ago. And it's been really rewarding to see how organizations are adopting the technology. Just 2 data points we wanted to share with you. One is from Forbes. They've been tracking over 100 big companies that are actively exploring blockchain through industry consortiums and other proprietary projects, really looking at business applications for blockchain. In April of this year, they featured 50 of those companies. So their criteria was companies with minimum revenues or valuations of at least $1 billion. And they were looking specifically at ones with US operations. And did an analysis of those and which ones are really leading the way in adapting decentralized ledgers to meet their operating business needs. What they list those all out. I encourage you to go look at the article. It's a good read. From a use cases perspective, the interesting data point that we wanted to surface here and share is that 50% of the companies featured from that list actually were building their applications on top of Ethereum or deriving platforms from Ethereum. Another great interesting development in the industry since 2017, JPM launched a pilot back then they called the Interbank Information Network, IIN, And that has matured. They've had hundreds of members. They actually have, as of today, I believe 345 firms who've signed a letter of intent as well to join, and that is considered really a leader in the peer-to-peer industry for payments, addressing long-standing challenges of interbank information sharing. So really looking at addressing some of the friction points there. Here's just a sampling, I guess, including some look at what people are doing cross countries, individual government entities, IT leaders, a good sampling of startups that are forming new consortiums, as well as enterprises who are doing their own internal work on the technology. Specifically, just to run through a couple of consortiums and clients and networks that we have the privilege to work with. We'll walk through 6 examples, and then I'm going to pass it over to Steve, who's going to do a bit deeper dive on the Kaleido platform as well. The first example here, Union Bank, they work together with over 400 rural banks in the Philippines to address an age-old problem of financial inclusion, starting first with domestic remittances. They've already moved on to various other use cases on blockchain platform, including announcing a stablecoin and doing a cross-border real-time gross settlement with a bank in Singapore. They found many business benefits in terms of process steps that were saved, 26 down to 5, saving time from almost a month down to minutes, and have been successful scaling and onboarding new members really frictionlessly over the last year. Again, some of these are in such remote communities that we literally, it takes a couple hours boat ride even to get to these rural communities. So really transforming the whole domestic economy there using these new payment rails that they're building. ComGo, it stands for Commodities Go. It's a commodities trade finance organization. Has a third of the top 20 banks in the world, oil majors, traders, and other key players in that space. They actually, from when they incorporated in August of last year, went into production in 4 months with their first use case, which is letter of credit, have subsequently rolled out other use cases, including KYC and receivables discounting. They've seen a variety of business benefits, including cash flow gains of 30 to 40%. They announced in September that they had transacted over $1 billion on the network in the prior 2 months, and are really moving full steam ahead in terms of scaling and growing that network to their complete target addressable market of that ecosystem. Atato is they're based in Bangkok. They have a third of the Pacifical tuna supply chain being tracked on the blockchain, as well as providing a number of other blockchain-based solutions, such as different portals and financial services solutions as well, in addition to core supply chain solutions. 3 more clients that I'll go through as well as examples, just to give you an idea of the breadth here. Green Fence works in media and entertainment as well as retail space. They launched digital collectibles for movie promotions such as Deadpool and Goosebumps, Sony and Fox. They've worked on digital collectibles with Heineken and other sports celebrities, quite an interesting range of campaigns and promotions there. The digital couponing space, they've worked with T-Mobile Tuesdays, and Kroger. They've actually achieved digital campaign engagement rates of 65%. They've had hundreds of thousands of people download these coupons on the day of these promotions and actually engage. And part of that is because of all of the costs they could remove, the fraud and waste, due to doing this on the blockchain. This is a great example of how consumers are getting the benefits that are powered by blockchain, but in many cases not even realizing blockchain is powering those benefits underneath. SMBX is really looking to revolutionize your ability to invest in local businesses in your community and removing a lot of friction that small and medium businesses often have when they're trying to meet their financing needs. And then World Wildlife Foundation, Panda Labs, just announced actually as part of the UN General Assembly, helping meet the sustainable goals through the UN Sustainable Goals through a token curated registry that they announced, and that's running on Ethereum blockchain as well.
Thanks, Sophia. So kind of moving into the final couple slides here before we transition over to Q&A. So if you have some questions, now is a great time to drop them in the chat, and we'll queue them up. We wanted to share just briefly from Kaleido's perspective a little bit of the so what. We came here to talk about enterprise Ethereum. We talked about a little bit about the history. We talked about the specific technologies. We talked about the ecosystem, the alliance. But the so what it really is, we see in the enterprise space, companies taking blockchain, enterprise Ethereum, and really using it to revolutionize their back office and their business networks. How enterprises can connect, transact, collaborate with each other is changing. And blockchain is driving that revolution through radical transparency, through offering a different trust model, a different level of efficiency around these B2B networks. And it's important to note that blockchain, as these networks are being reimagined, rebuilt, digitized, moving from antiquated systems to modern digital ones, often with tokens as digital assets now, running on a decentralized blockchain. That's a critical piece. We think of it as the beating heart, but it's not the whole solution. And the solution to modernize your business network has many components and many different technologies that need to come together to really enable that larger transformation. And so what's really exciting about Ethereum is that we see a whole technology stack emerging. Not just the blockchain network, you see it there kind of 2/3 of the way down in the transaction layer, but a whole set of new technologies forming a whole computing stack. So new data technologies or technologies in the data layer, bridging off-chain to on-chain, things like identity. Certain kinds of data should go on the chain and be collaborated with, but some things are not suitable to go on the chain. And so how those sorts of relationships work. Rob talked about privacy and how there are multiple ways to do privacy, from emerging spaces like zero-knowledge proofs to private enclaves, new blockchain first components coming along, data feeds and oracles to do middleware. Going further up into the application layer, we see things like digital assets being represented. York was talking about the token taxonomy initiative. Now this has really gone mainstream into the consciousness of enterprises. We're starting to standardize these digital asset types and categorize them. Advanced cryptography and how that fits in. So really a whole stack of new tools and technologies that are in your tool belt. And we see perhaps one of the most compelling things about the Ethereum space is you have the most complete set of technologies coming together. And Kaleido really is a cloud scale self-service platform for you to get all of these technologies working together. We partner with the likes of Microsoft and their cloud and other cloud vendors as well to provide you with production grade infrastructure to deploy all of that on, and we help you manage it. And so Kaleido is a blockchain business cloud. We really focused on these B2B networks and helping you to evolve them and push them forward and make them more efficient. Often, and we're not any, we work across all major industry verticals, and we see, we hear similar stories time and time again about problems that you're aware of in your industry and with how you connect to your partners that you've been thinking about solving for quite some time. And often a blockchain and the technology that comes along with the blockchain is the breakthrough that you need in order to move forward. So we're trying to help make that radically simple and bring that to enterprise. So with that, we'll sort of wrap up on the presentation portion, and we've got 5 minutes to turn over to Q&A. We'll leave up some helpful links for you as well. And just a reminder, as we said at the top of the call, we do plan on sharing the link recording around with you all and the slides as well for your reference.
Awesome. So first of all, thanks to all of our panelists for a great presentation. We do have some questions in the chat. We have just a few minutes to finish them, so if we don't get to all of them, we'll try to follow up with any that we missed. So the first question we have here is, does it make sense to use blockchain network with consensus mechanism that provides only crash fault tolerance, i.e. raft, POA, etc., and does not provide Byzantine fault tolerance? Steve, you want to take that one?
Rob, looks like you're ready to go.
Yeah.
I'm ready to quickly go. So I think it very much the permissioning network situations give that different scenarios that it can make sense to use different consensus mechanisms. And so I think within the different configurations and ways that you might be running your enterprise Ethereum network, that gives different scenarios and different properties that you will require from your consensus mechanism. And so potentially it might make sense in those scenarios to use a consensus mechanism that doesn't provide that Byzantine fault tolerance, because that's not a threat model that is important to protect against within your validators. So it's very much a case of having a toolkit of consensus mechanisms and choosing the appropriate consensus mechanism for the adversarial model that you're considering and the conditions that you're running your network in.
And just to add a bit from our perspective with Kaleido, we actually offer all of these choices today. And so from our bird's eye perspective of running many, many hundreds of these networks around the world, your networks, we actually see a fairly broad distribution, just from a data science perspective, reporting the numbers. It is worth noting, though, as the question kind of infers, that the Byzantine option, the IBFT, is both the most popular, and it's also the one that the EEA is looking at as its reference because it provides the most trustless way of the different nodes in the network transacting. As Rob was saying, you can make trade-offs, for example, for higher level of performance, and trade off some of the trustless nature of that through the consensus algorithm.
Great, thanks guys. So probably got time for one more question here. Can Kaleido be used to deploy production networks? If so, what is needed in terms of end-to-end tooling?
Absolutely. So all of the references that Kaleido, that Sophia mentioned from Kaleido are all production networks. We have a third of the top 20 banks in production. We offer a 99.9 SLA, 24/7 support, all of the sort of must-haves that enterprises need in going into production. From a tooling perspective, York did a pretty good overview of some of the most popular tools in the Ethereum space. In our Kaleido marketplace, we also link off to some of those most popular tools. So as a developer, you're probably looking at things like Remix, Truffle, and some Visual Studio does an excellent job of giving you the relevant plugins that you need in order to write smart contracts, pull in some standard ones, debug those, etc. What Kaleido does is we provide the runtime infrastructure that takes you from kind of team environments to QA and into production. So we have the full set of APIs and sort of admin capabilities through our console to allow the group of developers and DevOps folks to build their pipeline in, to promote your contracts, and to manage your infrastructure all the way through to production. And just to tie in a little bit then to the next question for Kaleido, how do we support consortium members' ownership? We allow you to start with a more centralized model, and we allow you to decentralize that over time by inviting external organizations into your consortium. They then create their own Kaleido accounts and manage their own infrastructure inside of that account. We even give you the flexibility of defining acceptable deployment regions and cloud providers around the world for those new members to join from, so you can have physical diversity of your network as well, or you can control and keep it within, for example, a region if you're governed by that region's laws as well. So we allow you to do that. And then what we've built in a governance system where everyone who joins isn't necessarily equal. What we see in the real world is there tends to be a core group of members that are really validators and stewards of the network. So we allow for different tiered participation as well. As you sort of decentralize that participation, you can customize that and manage those sorts of permissions. And finally, we also have an early program running for Kaleido Private Stack. So if you have some members that want to run on-premise, for example, or in a private cloud account, that is possible as well as through our early program.
Okay, and finally, how important do you guys see building up a pool of contributors to an enterprise network to make sure that it allows us to say that the ledger is safe? Because if only one party runs a network, that party controls the data, right?
Well, that is the beauty of a blockchain compared to just a good old-fashioned database. You know, the beauty of blockchain is you can, if you think about the way that our back office systems and our B2B networks work today, they are actually quite decentralized. They're decentralized to the point where they're incredibly inefficient. They're totally different systems on all sides and coordination. You know, you've got duplicate ledgers, you've got duplicate business logic. So what blockchain really allows you to do is to actually get some of the benefits of centralization via a common shared ledger, via common business logic and smart contracts, without giving up the control. So it's often key in the business networks we see to not go all the way in and sort of centralize it. Blockchain is this beautiful technology through consensus. It allows you to, all these organizations in the network, to still run their own nodes. And as you design the solution, you involve the right parties and you get their approval in real time via cryptographic signatures into a transaction. And so it's the right parties consenting to the transaction, but it's like a choreographed dance where everyone does it in the right moment. The transaction runs once, it's recorded once. So it's really this best of both worlds sort of technology, and that's what makes it really appealing. I think it is important to the question to really consider the design of the network and how those contributors are going to participate, and get what makes sense for your network, the right amount of diversity in participation, both from a redundancy perspective, but more importantly, you you don't want to find yourself in a place where it's hard to grow and scale the network because the parties that could join and ought to join really don't trust, and they feel like the governance of the network is just too centralized for them. Blockchain gives you the power to really decentralize that and get more parties involved. So we really strongly encourage you to do that and consider that as you design your network.
Awesome. Thanks, Steve. Again, thank you to our panelists, Steve, Sophia, Rob, York. Excellent presentation, and thanks to everybody for joining today. Have a great day.